And so, if you've been following our show and our channel for a while, you already know that birding is a huge part of Dustin's life. And from looking at birds came wildlife photography, and from that came local conservation work, and from that came nest box programs. But it didn't start out that way, did it?
No, and that wasn't the intention at all, right? It started out just with curiosity about birds. And like most things that are lifelong passions, it kind of snuck up on you. Um, it started by being brand new to birding and open-minded about learning about stuff and making mistakes along the way and starting to build skills that I have now. And more importantly, it became a cherished and rewarding, even a central part of my life. So my sister Carrie was the first person who characterized this as my journey in birding, and I had never thought about it that way. And in the moment when she said it, it hit me like, yes, I am on this journey. And I'm happy to say the journey continues, like, pretty much every day. She was 100% right. And it's really fun now that Hike and Hearth lets us continue that journey in yet a new way, because this is a hobby or a passion that just keeps on giving. It's a long game, and I'm into it.
So, when you think back to those early days or months or years when you were just first trying to figure out this whole birding thing, what's something you wish someone had just come out and told you?
The thing for me has been the opportunity for discovery and the enjoyment of that at my own pace and in the direction of my choosing, because it's always been a hobby, something I do to relax and for fun in the in-between times. I wish I'd known about at the beginning that there were so many different styles of birding. It's not just checklists and twitching, running after a locally appearing rarity. Those can be fun, and the rush of seeing a new bird just does not get old. But there's also birding as meditation or as a healing process. Sometimes that's called slow birding. There's journaling, photography, social media birding, big days, big sits, big years, Christmas counts, reading, digiscoping, blogging, urban birding, travel birding, and ecotourism. And of course, my favorite, conservation and nest box and habitat support. I'm sure there's a myriad other ways that work for birding for other people too, which I've yet to discover.
So, were there any things that you assumed in the beginning of your birding journey that turned out to be totally wrong or just unhelpful? Like things that maybe made it harder than it needed to be at the time?
Sure. I mean, it snuck up on me. I didn't intentionally become a birder, so I think my preconceptions were probably rather limited. But as I got into it, I thought maybe that birding was for dorks only. And I even was self-conscious about it, like introducing myself to other people. They'd be like, hey, what do you do for fun? And I would say like, oh yeah, it's kind of dorky, but I'm into birding. And smart, sensitive people were like, oh, that's not dorky at all. That's cool. Like, what is it about it that you like? And I realized setting something up as dorky makes it so, but being confident in it and realizing also birding has had like a real resurgence the last 10 years. Like it maybe used to be dorky a little bit, but there's a lot of like hipster and young people getting into birding. It's not the same hobby that it used to be.
So that's interesting because I've never considered being a dork or a nerd to be a negative thing. I've always considered myself like maybe a little bit alternative nerdy, but nerdy nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I'd encourage anybody who's never seen it to seek out the Venn diagram of dorks, dweebs, nerds, and geeks, I think.
Uh-huh.
Because those things are about intelligence and social skills. And there's a nice Venn diagram that some people who are intelligent and have social skills, I forget which one it is. I think it's a nerd, right? But that plays into the whole thing, and
Interesting.
in a different way that I hadn't planned to. But also in birding, there's a giant overlap with like conservation and local government.
Mm-hmm.
The community of birders are the people out there in the world that like truly are getting the righteous things done in the world, and it's been interesting to find that out.
Okay. All right. So, what are some of the misconceptions that you think exist when it comes to when you're just starting out as a birder? Or maybe even if you've been birding for a while, this may be a misconception that some people still have.
Yeah, I think people feel undue pressure to like know birds the first time they see them, or know certain bird calls, or be able to ID a bird the first time you see them. And that's not it at all, right? Like a lot of birding, especially for new birders, is about seeing something, absorbing, processing its features, and narrowing down to what it could be. And if you narrow it down and you don't know what it is, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Birding with other people can help solve that gap. Taking a picture and bringing it home was the way I like to solve that gap, because I would then compare it to my guides and stuff like that. But you definitely don't need to know anything going into birding the first time. And then new birders, I think, sometimes can get overwhelmed with people's gear and the minutia around their gear, like the optics, and stuff like f-stops and shutter speeds and digiscoping and what all that means. I felt that this week I pulled up to meet a new quasi-interested birder who was helping with some conservation stuff, and I pulled up in a brand new truck and had fancy binoculars, and I felt self-conscious about that. But I'm way down the journey on that, and that's what works for me. But it doesn't need to be that way for everybody.
Yeah. And you saved up for those things and took your time, right?
Yeah, yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. But also, like, thinking that believing real birders can only bird or go explore in remote places. For me, it's been immensely rewarding to develop a local connection to the land, my local patch, so to speak, over time, learning its patterns and being able to see when it's healthy, when it's hurting. So this is the long game that I was speaking of earlier. And then lastly, for new birders, not knowing how helpful context really is. So whether that's habitat, location, the season, the behavior, and even human impact like development, those things all matter a lot. And getting more in tune with those does help you to be a better birder in a way that I just, didn't anticipate in the beginning.
Okay, so based on all of that, how has your mindset changed since then? Like, what do you do differently now that you didn't do back then?
Yeah, so this is really personalized to me. I rarely rush out to catch a rare bird. I ebb and flow that way and sort of keeping track of what's around. And I might go after a rarity once in a while, but that's not my like go-to birding game. I will go after some of them sometimes, but few rarities are truly as rare as they seem in that moment. So sometimes they might show up again in 2 or 3 years, and that still is fun to be had in the future. And I don't mind that. There will certainly be other times in my life, God willing, that I have more time for birding and I'm less busy than I am now. And I don't mind saving good birds or good experiences for later. I want to savor those when I can, not just check the box and move on and put them behind me.
Mm.
So again, that's very personalized to me. But also like slowing down and focusing on observation instead of an ID. There's a lot of focus on like getting a live bird and seeing that bird for the first time, and that's well worth celebrating, right? Some people do a little lifer dance and they commemorate that moment with the people they're with, or even if they're alone, they do their lifer dance. But a birder that I followed early on named Bill Thompson III also introduced me to this concept called life looks. It might be a bird I've seen 100 times before, but if I get a better detailed look at it through my binoculars than I've ever had, that is also just as rewarding. So take like a pileated woodpecker. I see those kind of all the time, but at a distance, maybe as a flyover. Every once in a while, you'll get one 50 feet and it fills your binocular frame. And maybe you see the babies at the nest. Like those moments are super valuable to a lot of birders, myself included. I like to let the patterns and the familiarity of stuff do the heavy lifting for me. So I get in tune with the migration patterns and the biological life cycle patterns and let them lead the way a little bit in a way that I didn't when I was a new birder. And then using tools like Merlin or eBird or other guides, especially digital guides rather than flipping through pages. But I really stay away from them in the field. Being out in the field and experiencing the bird live is irreplaceable otherwise. So I fully absorb the experience and then go to my app if I need to confirm something or whatever. And then enjoy the process, not just the checklist. I am very much looking forward to an event in a couple weeks called the Big Sit. That's going to be on June 1st, sponsored by Sudbury Valley Trustees, which is a nice regional conservation group here in Massachusetts. So stay tuned to hear about that in a few weeks and what we saw on the Big Sit.
Mysterious. I don't even know about this yet. Okay, so you've had people I know ask you for advice, casual birders or people that are trying to get into it. What do you think tends to trip people up the most, that you've noticed in those conversations?
I think people feel a little bit of pressure to think of birding like a test and you have to get the ID right. So no one needs to feel like a birding expert to get started, right? It can be overwhelming to newcomers, whether it's like learning all these different species or these descriptive words, or really birders, like any hobby, have our own vocabulary. So that vocabulary can seem mysterious or overwhelming maybe a little bit. But they don't need to know that stuff. They're absorbing like the etiquette of birding and how to bird in a group particularly, and the etiquette of how to behave around birds, right? They sort of inherently know that they don't want to disturb the bird unnecessarily, even if they're not familiar with that yet. But then also all the sounds and the equipment that they see other people using, a lot of that can feel overwhelming. It doesn't. That stuff will become important to you over time at your own speed.
And a lot of that expensive stuff isn't really necessary to be a birder, right?
No, it's definitely not. And we're going to come to that as well. But it's important not to expect like instant results right away. And then the other thing is to new birders should never compare themselves to lifelong birders or people with like a $3,000 camera or other expensive optics, stuff like that. Realizing that the context matters as much. And then lastly, for new birders, don't be afraid of getting up early. That's definitely when the best stuff happens. If you're not an early riser, maybe your definition of early is a little bit different. But if 8 a.m. is early to you, make it a priority to get out as soon as possible during the day, because that's when the good stuff happens.
Okay. Did you ever get something like wildly wrong early on?
Beginner or not, every birder gets stuff wrong once in a while. And not once in a while, like a couple times, like all the time we get stuff wrong in the moment, because birding is tricky. Lots of species look alike, that sort of stuff. But I get where you're going with that question. Early on, I had kind of a humbling experience on an online birding forum of having mis-ID'd a Western tanager with an American goldfinch. The Western tanager happened to be showing up on someone's like brick windowsill in New York City, and American goldfinch was by far the more common species, and the angle and the color pattern looked like a goldfinch. But I learned that the beak was clearly Western tanager, and you couldn't possibly think it was a goldfinch with that beak. So I learned in that moment that beak is a much, much better filter for ID than color is. There's lots of yellow birds across multiple families, but once you know the beak like proportions and size a little bit, and it sounds daunting to new birders, but once you know those, you immediately get to the family that you're trying to ID. So it's really helpful to know like a warbler beak versus a tanager versus a sparrow or a finch with a really a really triangular beak. So that really helps you narrow it down a lot. So that was, a little bit of a difficult lesson with a really important outcome that I've been using ever since.
Okay. I guess my final question for this segment is going to be, what would you say to someone who thinks birding isn't for them because, like, they're not into hiking, or they live in an urban area, or they don't have a lot of gear, or they don't know a lot of birders to like teach them the ropes. Like, what would
Yeah.
you say to that?
I'm going to hit you with an unexpected question. Are you ready?
Sure.
Name for me a place where no birds are around.
The moon.
Okay, well, no one's going. Most of us are not birding on the moon, so good.
You did not say on planet Earth.
That's great. That's great. But inherent in your answer is that birds are kind of everywhere inside of our atmosphere.
Well, I assume they are. Like, I don't know if they're in the Sahara Desert. But
That's exactly right. Birds are everywhere, therefore birding works everywhere.
Got it.
And what I've learned too is that, like, you certainly don't need to be well sighted to be a good birder. We've talked about this before. But eyesight is a very individualized attribute, right? If you have young, healthy eyesight, you might not need binoculars. So you don't need any gear to be a good birder. But if you're into it, for most sighted people, there's a reward to seeing that, seeing a good bird. And binoculars are really the only essential piece of gear for folks who aren't just dedicated auditory birders. But birding can happen anywhere, anytime, or by ear and by all levels. So if you like birding, you'll appreciate working your way toward the gear that suits your style of birding, whether it's urban birding or shoreline birding or anything else. And then investment toward that will be well worth it when the time comes. Let your skill lead you to the type of gear that you want. And there's entry-level price points for binoculars and scopes and cameras and all that kind of stuff. But those investments will be worth your while if you're into birding. Just let yourself get there.